there was always a lot of confusion for me in my childhood, and that was partly, because of the family politics, because of our troubles, and because the fact that my mother and father's marriage had broken up when I was quite young. So I think for me as a teenager, there was an awful lot of confusion, which did end up with me being very rebellious. I didn't fit in at school. I got expelled from school. I didn't educate myself properly. I just, went down a wrong path, I suppose, at that age. I became pregnant just before my 16th birthday and had a baby at 16, became a single parent. And I think in many ways I felt very hopeless at that time. I suffered then with mental illness, depression, anxiety, agoraphobia, and it took me a long, long time, I suppose, to stabilise myself and to kind of know what I was about. So yeah, just a lot of my early life was about not fitting in and about being very confused about my own values. And I had my daughter in City Hospital. And at night when the fathers came, because it was only fathers visiting, so I wasn't, I didn't have a father to come up and visit. And I remember my mother saying to me, nobody will ever want you, because I had got pregnant. So I left Twinbrook probably then when I was about 12 or so. I spent a short time in care, and then I went back. As I say, I lived between my mother's house and my grandparents' house. I think I was just very lost. When I had been young, as I say, my father left when I was 7, and that really did have a very devastating effect on me. And I know it was very difficult times for my mother, and just there was a lot of issues at home, at that time. And I was kind of went between my grandparents and my mother's house. For a while, we had to go and live with my mother's people up on the Crumlin Road. My mother's, my grandmother on my mother's side was a widow woman, and it was very obvious that we weren't welcome there and we weren't wanted there. And it was a difficult time. I had to change schools, and and everything that was familiar to us was just overnight, just our whole lives changed. And I suppose, this was 1969, just as the Troubles were breaking out, August 1969, which is sort of strange, when my parents' marriage broke up. And in those days, nobody explained to children what was happening, so we didn't understand why we were lifted out of our home and taken to a strange place, why we had to change schools, why all of a sudden, my father was the enemy. We didn't know, and as I say, nobody ever sat us down and explained. So I just remember, I think that was the sort of catalyst for the future. I remember awful feelings walking home from school one day, and I heard a fire brigade, and I remember thinking, maybe my granny's house had burnt down and that would be a good thing, and then feeling the terrible guilt, that if anything happened, that would be my fault. And I also, in many ways, as a child, I thought it was my fault that my parents' marriage broke up. I didn't understand why, but I always felt that I was to blame, Yeah. So then later on, growing up, I didn't get on with my mother's new partner, and that caused a lot of issues. And so I think it was just, for me, an awful time of just confusion, just a person who was very lost.